This is Tractate Mezuzah, and I'll be reading from the William Davidson Talmud, which is the free Talmud that is provided by Sefaria.org on their webpage. And I'll just be reading the commentaries and the other aspects that are provided for free from Sefaria.org. Because my Hebrew is not so fantastic, I'm going to err on the side of caution and make sure that I don't overextend myself and possibly mispronounce some Hebrew words. So we'll start here at chapter 1.1. It is not permitted to write a mezuzah on the skins of ritually unclean cattle or on skins of ritually unclean wild animals. It is permitted, however, to write them on skins of Nebeloth and Terefoth. There's no need to consider the possibility of their having been pierced at the animal's heart. And there's 5 different commentaries from the Talmud on here. So from Tractate Shabbat 108a11, we have, the Gemara cites similar proofs. The sages taught one may write phylacteries on the hide of a kosher domesticated animal, and on the hide of a kosher non-domesticated animal, and on the hides of their unslaughtered carcasses, and on the hides of animals with a condition that will cause them to die within 12 months. And one may wrap the parchment with the hair of these animals and sew them with their sinews. And it is halakha. It is a halakha transmitted to Moshe from Sinai that the parchment of phylacteries may be wrapped with the hair of these animals and sewn with their sinews. But one may not write on the hide of a non-kosher animal or on the hide of a non-kosher undomesticated animal. And it goes without saying that one may not write on their skins when they are nivelot or tirfot. And one may not wrap the parchment with the hair of non-kosher animals, nor may one sew them with their sinews. So I might be pronouncing Nevelot or Terefot, and maybe it's Trefa. It's English spelling. It's Tereifot. Sometimes it can be hard to discern those things, for me at least. Then another commentary from Tractate Sefer Torah 1.1, which is another minor tractate. It is not permitted to write a scroll on the Torah. Is not permitted to write a scroll of the Torah on skins of ritually unclean cattle or on skins of ritually unclean wild animals, nor may they be sewn with their sinews or the parchment rolls of tefillin be wound with their hair. It is an oral prescription delivered to Moshe at Sinai that these shall be written on the skins of ritually clean cattle or on skins of ritually clean wild animals, that they shall be sewn together with ritually clean sinews, that the tefillin rolls shall be wound with ritually clean hair, and that the writing be done with ink, because the latter requirement has support in Scripture, and I wrote them with ink in the book. And so we continue here with Tractate. Other context comes from Tractate Sopharim, and Tractate Sopharim 1 and 1.2, which is pretty much a continuation of what's been said. So it's showing a lot of parity within writing any holy texts and holy aspects. So, and then we have another commentary from Tractate Tefillin 1.1. It is not permitted to write the 4 scrolls of Tefillin on skins of virtually unclean cattle or on skins of virtually unclean wild animals. It is permitted, however, to write them on skins of Nebeloth and Terefoth, and there is no need to consider the possibility of their having been pierced at the animal's heart. So with all that in mind, let's reread that chapter 1, section 1. It is not permitted to write mezuzot on the skins of virtually unclean cattle or on skins of virtually unclean wild animals. It is permitted, however, to write them on skins of Nebeloth and Terefoth, and there is no need to consider the possibility of their having been pierced at the animal's heart. It is required to leave a space of 1 line on every side of the text of the Mezuzah, according to our Shimon ben Eliezer. If a hole was made in the place of the script, it is unfit for religious use, but if it occurred in the margin, it remains fit. If the letter Vav in a Mezuzah was shaped like a Zayin, or vice versa, curved letters like straight-lined letters, or vice versa, open letters closed, or vice versa, or if the shape of its letters had been altered in any other way, or if it was written in obsolete Hebrew, it is unfit for religious use. And further commentary comes from the Talmud Tractate Tefillin 1.2. If tefillin scrolls were perforated, they become unfit for religious use if the hole occurred in the written part, but if it occurred In the margin, they remain fit. If the letter Vav was shaped like a Zayin, or vice versa, straight line letters like curved ones, or vice versa, open letters closed, or vice versa, or if the shape of their letters had been altered in any other way, or if they were written in obsolete Hebrew, or were made as a kind of amulet, they are unfit for religious use. And that comes from Tractate Tefillin 1:2. A magazine for straw, a wood shed, and any storage room are exempt from the Mezuzah. A stable for cattle is exempt, but if women make use of it, it is liable. Cone-shaped huts, travelers' stations, field sheds, and tanneries are exempt from Mezuzah. And a commentary comes from Talmud Tractate Yoma 11a 7. Rav Kahana taught in Baraisa before Rav Yehuda, a storehouse for hay and a cattle barn, and a woodshed and a storehouse are exempt from the obligation of Mezuzah, due to the fact that the women make use of them. And what is the meaning of the term make use? It means that the women bathe in them. Since women bathe there unclothed, it is inappropriate to fix a mezuzah there. Rabbi Yehuda said to him, the reason that there is no requirement to fix a mezuzah there is due to the fact that women bathe there. One can learn by inference that standard buildings of this kind, where women do not bathe, are obligated in the mitzvah of affixing a mezuzah there. But wasn't it taught in a different baraisa, a cattle barn is exempt from the obligation of mezuzah, unrelated to whether or not women bathe there? Back to the text here. A bathhouse is exempt, but if a dwelling house adjoins it, the outer doorway is liable. A corner doorway that has only one doorpost, or a doorway made in a structure of boards, which has only one doorpost, is liable. R. Eliezer ben Yaakov declares it exempt. Arched doorways are exempt, but R. Meir and R. Yehuda declare that they are liable. All, however, agree that if they have the usual structure below and the arched section above, they are liable to mezuzah. An additional Talmud commentary comes from Eruvin 11b 14. The Gemara relates that Rav Shishit once found Rabbi Bar Shmuel and said to him, did the master teach anything with regard to the halakot of the form of a doorway? He said to him, yes, we learned in a baraisa with regard to an arched gateway. Rabbi Meir deems the owner obligated to affix a mezuzah, and the rabbis deem him exempt. However, they both agree that if it supports the vertical sides of the gate before it arches are 10 handbreadths high, that the gate requires a mezuzah. City gates, the gates of open places, and the gates of temple courts are exempt. The doorways of chambers in the temple were exempt from mezuzah, but the chamber of the counselors, which served as a residence for the high priest on 7 days in the year, and potter's booths are subject to mezuzah. R. Yossi declares them exempt. Additional commentary comes from Tractate Yoma 10a, and I'm just going to cover part of that. I'm not going to cover the entire because there's quite a bit from Yoma 10a here. So the Gemara explains, although God will enlarge Japheth, referring to the Persians who descended from Japheth and who assisted in constructing the second temple, the divine presence rests only in the tents of Shem. In the first temple, which was built by King Solomon without the patronage of a foreign power. The Gemara asks, from where do we derive that the Persians descended from Japheth? The Gemara answers, as it is written, the sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan and Tuval and Meshach and Tiras. Genesis 10:2. The Gemara explains, Gomer, that is Germameah, Magog, that is Candia, Madai, that is Macedonia, Javan, in accordance with its plain meaning, Greece, Tuval, that is the nation called Beit Yonaki, Meshach, that is Messiah. With regard to Tiras, Rabbi Samai and the rabbis disagree, and some say the dispute is between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis. One said that is Beit Terekai, and one said that is Persia. According to that approach, Persia is listed among the descendants of Japheth. Rabbi Yosef taught Tiras is Persia. The list of nations continues, and there are several more lines with a debate from the rabbis deciding which nations apply to which individuals. But following that, the Gemara resumes the discussion of the high priest relocation to the Parhedron chamber The rabbis taught none of the chambers in the temple had a mezuzah except for the chamber of Parhedron, in which there was a place of residence of the high priest. Only residence in which one sleeps require a mezuzah, and the only chamber in the temple that fits the description was the Parhedron chamber. Rabbi Yehuda said, that is not the reason, after all. Weren't there several chambers in the temple in which there was a place of residence designated for priests to sit and sleep, and yet they did not have a mezuzah? Rather, the mezuzah in the chamber of Parhedron was there because there was a rabbinic decree. The Gemara asks, what is the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that there was no fundamental obligation to affix a mezuzah in the Parhedron chamber, and that one was affixed there due to a decree? Rabbi said that Rabbi Yehuda holds the legal status of any house that is not designated for residence, both for the summer and for the rainy season, is not that of a house, and therefore does not require a mezuzah. Abai raised an objection to his opinion from a verse. How could you suggest that the legal status of a residence occupied for only part of the year is not that of a house? Isn't it written, I will strike the winter house with the summer house? Amos 3:15. Apparently, even a residence occupied only half the year is a house. Rabbah said to him, a residence occupied only part of the year may be called the winter house or the summer house. It is not called a house unmodified. A house is a structure used year-round. Abai raised a different objection to the opinion of Rabbah from a Mishnah. If one brought produce from the field into the sukkah that he constructed for the festival of Sukkot, on the festival of Sukkot, Rabbi Yehuda obligates him to tithe the produce, and the rabbis exempt him from tithing the produce. And it was taught concerning the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda obligates the owner of the sukkah to include the sukkah in the joining of courtyards, like any of the houses in the courtyard, and in the mitzvah of affixing a mezuzah in the sukkah, and in separating tithes from produce brought into the sukkah. One is obligated to tithe his produce only when its processing has been completed. When he brings the produce into the house, he is obligated to tithe it. Rabbi Yehuda holds that the legal status of a sukkah, in which one resides for a mere 7 days, is that of a house in terms of the mitzvah of mezuzah. And if you say that Rabbi Yehuda rules that by rabbinic law the status of the sukkah is like that of a house, but that by Torah law his opinion is consistent with Rabbah's opinion, granted, with regard to the joining of courtyards and mezuzah, it is possible to say that the obligation is by rabbinic law. However, with regard to tithes, it is possible to say that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the obligation is by rabbinic law. An additional commentary comes from Yoma 11a 5. Rather, Abai said, the reason that no mezuzah was affixed there was due to the danger involved. The gates of the city populated by Jews certainly require mezuzah. However, since Gentiles live there as well, the danger is that the Gentiles would suspect the Jews of witchcraft or espionage, as it was taught in a baraisa. The mezuzah belonging to an individual is examined twice every 7 years to determine whether it was stolen or became disqualified. And in order to avoid excessive burden on the community, the mezuzah belonging to the public is examined twice in a 50-year Jubilee period. Chapter 2. The mezuzah is placed on the right-hand side of the entrance from the street into the lodge, and on the right-hand side of the exit from the courtyard into the lodge. If a garden has a doorpost where it adjoins the courtyard, the mezuzah is placed on the right-hand side of the exit from the garden into the courtyard, and if a lodge is attached to it, mezuzot are to be placed on both doorways of the lodge. Where small rooms open into a reception room, the mezuzah is placed on that doorway which is customarily used. If they are all customarily used, mezuzot are placed on all the doorways. If a number of rooms have doorways leading from one room to the other, mezuzot are placed at the entrance of each one of them. Our Yehuda says, if the ladder is movable on the 4 sides, ... If a doorway leads from a roof into a room, the mezuzah is placed on the right-hand side of the entrance from the roof. R. Nathan ben R. Yossi said, in such a case, Beit Shammai hold that the doorway is subject to mezuzah, and Beit Hillel hold that it is exempt. In a booth that is set back from the edge of a roof, the mezuzah is to be placed on the right-hand side of the exit from the booth to the roof. R. Yossi says, on the right-hand side of the entrance from the roof to the booth. In the case of a portico that is set back from the rooms and has no other exit. The mezuzah is placed on the right-hand side of the exit from the portico into the rooms. R. Yossi says, on the right-hand side of the entrance from the rooms to the portico. If an entrance serves as two doorways and a wall of not more than 1 handbreadth in width separates them, only one mezuzah is to be affixed. According to R. Yehuda, if the wall was wider than that, 2 mezuzot are required. The mezuzah is placed in the upper half of the doorpost. So our mayor, R. Yehuda, says it should be placed below the handbreadth from the top of the doorpost and above 1 handbreadth from the bottom. Additional Talmudic commentary comes from Tractate Menachot 33a. In the handbreadth adjacent to the public domain, perhaps the further the mezuzah is from the inside of the house, the better, and one may affix it even fully outside the airspace of the entrance. To counter this, Shmuel teaches us that the mezuzah must be within the airspace of the entrance itself. And Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says, if one wrote a mezuzah on 2 sheets, it is unfit. The Gemara raises an objection from a baraisa that teaches if one wrote a mezuzah on 2 sheets and placed it on the 2 doorposts of the entrance, it is unfit. The Gemara states the objection by inference. If the mezuzah was affixed on 1 doorpost, it is fit, despite the fact that it is written on 2 sheets. The Gemara answers, the baraisa is not referring to a case where one affixed a mezuzah on 2 doorposts. Rather, the baraisa is saying that if it was written on 2 sheets in such a manner that it is fit to be affixed to 2 doorposts, i.e., there is a space between the writing of the first and the second passages, so that one can separate the 2 sheets from different doorposts, it is unfit. This is in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yehuda, citing Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says the halakha is that a mezuzah must be affixed to the doorpost on its right side, and the right side is determined by the direction from which one enters the room. With regard to a mezuzah, when deciding which side is the right side, one should follow the indication of the hinge. The Gemara asks, what is the indication of the hinge? Rav Ada said, the socket into which the hinge is inserted. The room with the socket is considered the inside room, and the mezuzah is affixed to the side which is on one's right when entering the room. The Gemara asks, what are the circumstances, i.e., in what kind of case was a guideline to follow the indication of the hinge necessary? The Gemara answers, this indication is necessary in a case where there is an entrance that is between 2 houses, e.g., between a room for men and a room for women. As in such situation, the direction of the entrance is unclear. The Gemara relates, the exilarch built a new house. He said to Rav Nachman, affix mezuzot for me in the house. Rav Nachman said, first erect the doors, so that I can affix the mezuzot in the appropriate places according to the placement of the hinges. Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says, if one fashioned a mezuzah like a bolt, i.e., he wedged it into a hole in the doorpost of a gate or affixed it to the doorpost horizontally, it is unfit. The Gemara raises a difficulty. Is that so? But when Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef came from Eretz Israel to Babylonia, he said all the mezuzot in the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi were fashioned like a bolt. And he also said the entrance by which Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi entered the study hall did not have a mezuzah. The Gemara answers, this is not difficult. This ruling that it is unfit is referring to a case where it is prepared like a peg. He inserted it deep into the doorpost while it was lying horizontally. And that ruling that it is fit is referring to a case where it is prepared like an ankle, it is vertical. With regard to the second element of Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef's statement, that the entrance by which Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi entered the study hall did not have a mezuzah, the Gemara asks, is that so? But what of the entrance by which Rav Huna would enter the study hall, which had a mezuzah? The Gemara answers, the entrance was the one through which all were accustomed to enter the study hall. By contrast, the entrance that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi used was a side entrance, which was designated for him alone. Consequently, it was exempt from the obligation to affix a mezuzah. As Rav Yehuda says, that Rav says, with regard to a mezuzah, follow the entrance that people are accustomed to using. Rabbi Zira says that Rav Matana says that Shmuel says, it is a mitzvah to place a mezuzah at the beginning of the upper third of the doorpost, and Rav Huna says, one raises the mezuzah a handbreadth from the ground, or one distances it from the cross beam, i.e., the lintel a handbreadth, and the entire entrance between those two handbreadths is fit for the placement of the mezuzah. The Gemara raises an objection from a baraisa. One raises the mezuzah a handbreadth from the ground, or one distances it from the crossbeam a handbreadth, and the entire entrance between those two handbreadths is fit for the placement of the mezuzah. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says, the verse states, and you shall bind them for a sign upon your arm, Deuteronomy 6:8, and then it states, and you shall write them upon the doorpost of your house, Deuteronomy 6:9. Just as the binding of the phylacteries is performed on the upper part of the arm, so too the writing, i.e. the placement of a mezuzah, must be specifically on the upper part of the entrance. The Gemara explains the objection. Granted, according to Rav Huna, he states his ruling in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, but according to Shmuel, in accordance with whose opinion does he state his ruling? It is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and it is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Rav Huna, son of Rav Natan, said, actually, Shmuel's ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. If one made a groove in the wall at a distance of not more than one handbreadth from the doorpost and placed the mezuzah in it, the mezuzah is valid. If the distance was greater than that, it is invalid. If one made a groove in a stick and put the mezuzah in it, it is invalid. If one inserted the mezuzah in a tube and hung it up behind the door or behind the door post, our mayor declared it valid, but our Yehuda declared it invalid. A new house is subject to the obligation of mezuzah as soon as it is completed. One who lodges in an inn in the land of Israel for 30 days is subject to the obligation of mezuzah, and if one rents a house, he must affix a mezuzah forthwith. Outside the land of Israel, one who lives in an inn is exempt, and one who rents a house must affix a mezuzah after 30 days. Additional Talmudic commentary comes from Tractate 44a 13. The Gemara notes that distinction is also taught in a baraisa in the case of one who resides in a guest house in Eretz Israel, or one who rents a house outside of Eretz Israel for the first 30 days. He is exempt from the mitzvah of mezuzah. From then on, he is obligated. But one who rents a house in Eretz Israel must affix a mezuzah immediately due to the settlement of Eretz Israel. A Jew who rents a house from a Gentile or from a Samaritan must affix a mezuzah forthwith, and when he quits, he must remove it. But if one rents a house from an Israelite, he affixes the mezuzah forthwith, and when he quits, he must not remove it. Additional Talmudic commentary from Baba Metzia 102a2. The sages taught in a baraisa, if one rents out a house to another, the responsibility to prepare a mezuzah for it and affix it is upon the renter, and when he leaves, he may not take it in his hand and leave with it. Rather, he must leave it there. But if he rented a house from a Gentile, he may take it in his hand and leave with it. And there was an incident in which a renter took his mezuzah in his hand and left with it, and as a punishment, he eventually buried his wife and 2 sons. One who buys a house from a Gentile or a Samaritan is under the obligation of putting a mezuzah. But if he bought it from an Israelite, it is presumed to have been provided with the necessary mezuzot. If one buys a brick mold from a Gentile, he should not heat it before he had examined it. The scroll and the mezuzah should be examined once in 25 years. According to Ar Shimon, Ar Yaakov says a much longer time may be allowed to intervene. Both, however, agree that if it was transferred from one place to another, it requires examination. In like manner, water tanks in a public domain must be examined once in 7 years, but those situated in a private domain once in 25 years. According to our mayor, what the sages say, in either case, the general rule is that wherever there is a top cover, the examination takes place once in 7 years, and where there is no top cover, the examination takes place once in 25 years.